Welcome to another Act for Dummies. I'm Scott. This is Will.
I'm Will.
I've got some dummy questions for Will today. A lot is changing.
A lot going on.
The government right now.
Yeah.
It is, March
4th?
4th of 2025. So,
the Doge is in full swing.
Doge is in full swing. There's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of things changing. So, trying to read and keep up with it, but I always feel kind of lost. And so I read an article recently. I figured I would save up my questions from that article.
Let's do it.
The article was about the new, what is Pete Hegseth as a Secretary of Defense?
Yeah, Hegseth, new Secretary of Defense.
What do you call it? What's the word?
SecDef.
SecDef.
And then the Deputy Secretary of Defense is the DepSecDef.
DepSecDef.
This has a ring to it. It's kind of like a little pattern. Dep.
It's pretty tough.
Yeah.
So I read an article about some new acquisition rules he was putting in, maybe, or it was a memo.
Yeah.
And he was saying that the Department of Defense needs to start using, I always can't remember, SWA? SW.
Oh, the software acquisition pathways.
SWP. So I don't know what that is.
Okay.
And then he went on to say to promote using OTAs.
All right.
And CSOs.
CSOs.
And I've talked a little about OTAs. I think I kind of know what that is. Maybe you can cover that also. But CSOs and the SWP and like why did he do this and what does it mean?
Yeah, let's get into it. So should we talk a little bit about the Doge first and some of the changes there
if that makes
maybe
sense.
A little bit of background, maybe take a couple steps back. So this is in the years I was in the government, I went through 3 administration changes.
Okay.
I don't think there's any one as drastic as this one. But in every one, there's been kind of pros and cons, right, of a new administration coming in. It's always a little bit of a shakeup. And in every one, good or bad, I tried to be optimistic about it, So that'll be the tone, I guess we'll talk through, is one of optimism. But government contracting right now, I've never seen it more in the news. The Doge is talking about, Elon Musk is talking about it, and it's definitely our community has, there's some light on the community for better or worse. I think there's a lot of good aspects to this kind of attention. And one of them is this push for efficiency. And when you apply efficiency to government contracting, I think their version of that is what Clinton's administration argued back in the mid 90s, which is we are not buying things in a way that's keeping pace with the current commercial technology. Mm-hmm. So under Clinton, major changes happened with FASA. We talked about that, Federal Acquisition Streamlining Act, and FARA, a Federal Acquisitions Reform Act, I think. But anyway, those acts were like meant to push the government more toward commercial buying. Okay. That was back in, I think, 94 was FASA. It was back in the mid 90s.
Back when the only software was like Windows.
Yeah, Windows 95. We weren't even buying Windows 95 right. So it's like, in a sense, there's nothing new under the sun. It's like the Doge has come, but what they're arguing and what they're advocating for, that itself is not new. It's we need to catch up. We need to speak more of the commercial language, industry's language, and we need to stop being so slow and sluggish, and we need to stop wasting money. And a lot of the way money's wasted is through the acquisition process. I think anyone in the acquisition community would understand that to be true, right? That there's so much time wasted, so much money gets wasted just from the process. And if you work in the system, you just have to be a servant of that system. You have to comply with rules that you don't necessarily agree with, but you just everyone has to live with these rules. Mm-hmm. So the Doge, in a lot of ways, and what Hegseth, the new SecDef for the DoD, even though this applies to the whole government, is trying to more directly tackle how we're going to be efficient with acquisition.
Okay.
And so one of those ways, this doesn't really apply to the civilian agencies, even though I think they have their own pathways. But we talked a while back about like big A, little a acquisition. Big A little a acquisition. You're really talking about procurement, the art of contracting or creating the contract.
Okay.
So involved in that little bubble is competition, competing among sources, talking market research, talking to companies, and then engaging in a contractual action where you're obligating the funds, and then you have the contract at the end, and you're monitoring the performance through quality assurance and all that. That's all kind of procurement.
Okay.
But broader, the acquisition system itself includes the process of going through requirements definition, defining what need you have, that you have a problem, and then you have a need that will be satisfied through spending money to companies. And then procurement is a piece of that. And then delivery and adoption, that's under the realm of like program management.
Okay.
And for big programs, a lot of people are involved. And like in the DoD, like top brass, like the Joint Chiefs of Staff and others. And there's a joint requirements review process where they're looking at the because they're about to spend a bunch of money. So they have different categories for the programs. They call them ACATs, which I think is acquisition category.
Nice.
ACAT level 1, 2, and 3, and it all depends on the dollar value.
Okay.
And so if it's going to be like $500 million or whatever, or over $1 billion, you got to work it through this big acquisition process. And that could also include one acquisition or program could include multiple contracts.
Mm-hmm.
There could be lots of contracts involved in this acquisition of this because you're defining that acquisition not in contractual terms like a contract, but the capability itself, which could involve various installation contracts and different contracts here and there. And so that's the acquisition, big acquisition. And there's a lot of pathways, quote unquote pathways. It's in DoD. There's going to be a DoD heavy. We'll get into more non-DoD, I guess, but for the DoD viewers out there and DoD contractors, maybe. But
there's a bunch of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of you guys out there. So in case you were curious about that, the software acquisition. So it's DoD 5000, DoD 5000.02 talks about this acquisition system, and it's very most of the pathways of acquisition are very linear. And this is kind of like the Cold War era of us buying big planes and tanks, and you have have like big milestones, A, B, C, and an A, you're coming up with your capability document, like what, with your analysis of alternatives. So everyone's spending a lot of time, sometimes years, and just figuring out what they want. And then you move into milestone B and then C. So you're going into the contracts, and then you're prototyping it. And then you're going into full production, and it's just like this, a long, drawn-out assembly line. So a plane would take 10 years,
just to start.
Just from the ideation, from that capability decision document, all the way into getting your first batch of planes.
Okay.
10-year process, easy.
Yeah.
Tanks, same way. So the acquisition process is very long and deliberate, and there's good stuff about that. And it's our government, Americans, we're the best military in the world. We're very advanced. We just want to make sure that we're getting the best. Of course, our military makes mistakes, but we do have you can say it's a very sophisticated system. The problem is now we're dealing with new technology that doesn't wait 10 years for the next advancement. So there's something called the speed of relevance. Speed of relevance is when you're trying to contract something at the speed of relevance, you're trying to contract it at the speed in which it's still relevant and it's not obsolete. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing that whole 10-year process where you're following that pathway, you're not going to buy anything that's, that's why we can spend 10 years getting something. And then by the time we get it, there's new versions of it out. Maybe not as bad for some things that are maybe more timeless, like, I don't know, planes.
Tanks, yeah.
Tanks.
Yeah.
Software, no. Yeah. So software requires a completely different type of buying, and our procurement and acquisition system has not fully shifted over into this new era of modernized contracting. And what that requires is less of this really drawn out upfront planning where it takes like 2 years to come up with a capability, decision document or whatever. But actually to just start small, to do like the agile development process and the lean process that, in software speak, like, DevOps and all that, to get something out there to the market, or in our case, get something out there to our end user and the government, and then iterate on that, build on that. And so the software acquisition pathway came out in the DoD in 2000, I want to say it was 2019, as a way to tell the DoD, hey, there's this new pathway. You don't have to do milestone A, B, C, whatever. You can do the cyclical process, where it's not necessarily linear. The challenge with it, though, is since it came out in 2019, there hasn't been a lot of guidance on how to do this. There's just been this document. I think it's, we need to look at, I don't know if it's 5000.85. We'll see if I'm right. 5000.85, please. Ding, 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 ding. That is a software acquisition pathway. And if you read 5000.85, that is, again, this is not just contracting. So we're not really talking about contracting. We're talking about how you go about getting a requirement approved and procured and delivered. And because software is never done, they try to articulate it in a way that it's kind of cyclical, where it just builds on itself. Okay. So it's one thing to say that and put it in a document, put it in a piece of paper, and say, okay, Department of Defense, go do it. It's another thing to actually do it. And for them to actually do it, it takes a complete different culture change. The education has to change. DAU hasn't caught up. Defense Acquisition University has not really caught up with this. So it's like, they're dropping a big mindset shift change or paradigm shift in the form of a 5-page document and expecting, what do we do with this? Like, the chains of command don't work that way, because this type of contracting requires balanced teams to be together. And unless you're in a tight-knit program office, that usually doesn't happen. So the way you work is different if you're really involved in buying and delivering software. So, and the more we move into, I think this is Hegseth's point, as the new SecDef, and the Doge's point, and this new administration, previous administration made this point too, but it's like, we are shifting more and more into software, more than we ever have before, especially with AI and new emerging technologies. Yeah. Like the Internet of Things is real. Even tangible things that we have, like cranes and planes, are embedded with software and are collecting data and using data in ways to increase accuracy and save lives and save costs. And so we're still not caught up with software, but software is not catching up to us. When I say us, I mean the government. So there's this clear example. In 2019, they had the software pathway as a way you can use it or you not use it. Now the SecDef is saying, use it for all software. Okay. And now they're saying, which is even more direct and forceful, is when it comes to the procurement now we'll talk about little a. Okay. So big A is how you're going to plan this whole thing, that software acquisition pathway. I didn't really get into that. Sorry. So they instead of one big delivery like milestone B or C, like you're doing a prototype, it's, if you look at the software acquisition pathway, you're doing a bunch of little iterations. So it draws it out. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a process on what you need to do. It really still leaves a lot of teams clueless, because again, maybe if the teams aren't clueless, their leadership is clueless. So even if they know what they need to do, like these program managers, they could have management, especially if it's a high dollar program, that still wants to run things through a long drawn out requirements review process or something. So the whole culture of the DoD is not caught up on this pathway yet. But that's, I guess, the point of this. I think it's just a draft memo right now. Who knows if it's going to come out, when it's going to come out. But the procurement piece of it is, okay, when you're actually going to create the agreement for this between the government and the contractor, you're going to, for software, the default approach is going to be using other transaction authority, not the FAR. And then the way you're going to seek proposals, like the competitive process, before you even get to the OT, other transaction, you will use a CSO process, commercial solutions opening process. And so that's I think that was in the draft memo. Maybe it's out in the memo now that
so
they're gonna.
What is a CSO?
Yeah, so a CSO. So a CSO is in the DFARS. It's the FARS supplement.
Is it only a
the
DoD
defense
thing?
It's only a deal. I think GSA uses it too. GSA has their own CSO, commercial solutions opening. So in one of the best ways. So first of all, CSO is not a contract. It's a it's a solicitation. It's like an RFP.
So you would not do an RFP.
You don't do an RFP. You do a CSO.
Okay.
And the most closely related thing to a CSO is in part 35 of the FAR.
Okay.
Boom, 35.
We're getting up there.
Yeah, getting up there now. Yeah, graduated at 35, level 35. That's research and development contracting.
Okay.
There is a type of solicitation for R&D contracts for basic and applied research, and it's called a broad agency announcement, a BAA.
BAA.
It's pronounced ba. Ba. No, I'm just kidding. It's just BAA. But a broad agency announcement is for basic and applied research. It is a streamlined way of getting R&D contracts out. You ask for white papers, and the white papers come in. There's still a level of competition, but you're awarding based on the merit of those white papers. This is part 35. This is the BAA.
Okay.
So there's like a merit review board. And usually they're like scientists and stuff get together and they're looking at the white paper. So it's none of this traditional like part 15 or even FAR part 13 where it's like send your RFP out 30 days, get proposals, then go through a technical review board or look at past performance. None of that. With the BAA, you're looking at white papers and you're going through a board and then you can award based on the BAA.
Are you requesting white papers or are they already there?
Yeah, the BAA is the request.
Okay.
So it's a broad agency announcement. The agency is announcing something broad, come one, come all. We want, and it's broad because it's really for basic and applied research.
Okay.
So basic research is kind of open-ended research where you're just looking into the development of a new technology, but it's not ready for prime time. Like the technology readiness level is, we're just kind of trying to advance the art of the possible.
See what it might be.
See what it might be. A lot of basic research contracts or grants sometimes are for universities and labs, like Lincoln Labs and stuff.
Right.
Applied is when you're starting to take that research and apply it to some kind of capability or function. But
what is a white paper?
A white paper is it's the proposal. So you can specify in your BAA what you want in a white paper. But whenever someone says like, send me a white paper, it's kind of like the document that explains what that entity, whether a university or a company, what their capability is, what they want to convey. Like, what can I do for you? This is what my thinking.
It's like a proposal.
Yeah, and because it's R&D, it's almost like maybe it's called a white paper because we're talking about R&D, we're talking about inventions. So it's like it's a white paper on someone's invention.
Okay.
So maybe that's the difference in terminology. So less of a proposal like this is what we do, this is our company, here's our services, here's our labor rates. The R&D world is a little bit more of a inventive or innovative. So this is I'm an inventor. We're a company just invented this. Here's our white paper on it.
It's like a technical description, maybe.
Technical description, but the white paper can also include your prices. It can also get pretty detailed on moving into the contract and terms and stuff. But so you can award off that. All right. So the reason I went so a long way into the BAA because a CSO operates a lot like a BAA, but it's for commercial technology. So it's still kind of like a commercial prototype, but it's commercial technology that basically it can exist right now in the private marketplace. So you're not talking about something like the art of the possible, like in Part 35, like a BAA, or a basic and applied research. You're actually, with a CSO, you release it just like a BAA, but you could be ready for prime time. There could be something in the market right now, and you're ready to do it. So you're just asking for white papers. It can be white papers. CDAO, the Chief Data AI Office, they do a CSO, but they ask for videos.
Okay.
5-minute videos and their trade wins thing.
I see.
So the way they do that is they do it through a CSO. So they don't do an RFP or anything. It's like this broad announcement, come one, come all. But the way we want to see your submissions is not on a white paper. Make us a 5-minute video on what you can do.
Okay.
And then that 5-minute video goes through a merit review board, just like a BAA.
And so sounds like there's not a lot of maybe direction from the government either. That's kind of more of an open-ended question. Like,
yeah,
hey, you guys got something cool.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
You can make it as open-ended or as detailed as you want it to be.
Okay.
Like we had one in the Joint AI Center that we did for a specific capability for data analytics. We wanted AI applied to data labeling.
Okay. And
we sent a CSO for that. So we put specified in the CSO, here's our problem, data analytics for data labeling. And then we got some back. And then the based on the submissions, we ended up just broadening the CSO to a bunch of different categories. And we called it Try AI, but it was like a try before you buy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then we got, now if you set up a CSO though, or a BAA or whatever, you just have to be able to work the logistics of receiving those. Because there's BAAs you can send where just the overload of submissions, no one's reading them,
Okay.
and then companies catch on that, and they're like, am I just sending this to someone? I'm not going to hear anything. Mm-hmm. So, and you totally can. You can send a white paper to a company in response to a broad agency announcement and just hear crickets because they don't owe you an answer,
Mm-hmm.
But it's not good business. It's not good practice. It's not good business practice for the government to organize a CSO and ask for a company to take their time and really not give them an adequate response on how their submission did, or at least let them know we've received it.
Yeah. Sounds like our RFP video.
Yeah, the RFP video?
Yeah.
Oh, the RFI?
I spent all my time on a request for information, and all it brought me was nothing but frustration.
So it's like that. So if you're going to set this kind of thing up, set it up in a way where you're going to have a merit review board. You're going to have a team of people who are going to look at the submissions and work the mechanics of how you're going to review this. But if you set all that up, it's an incredibly fast and efficient way to order emerging commercial technology. And that's why this memo, this Hexeth, and the focused on a CSO as a way to buy software, because you're cutting through red tape of other FAR methods, and you're getting to, let's just throw this announcement out. All you need is maybe like 2 or 3 paragraphs. This is what we need. And you're getting all these submissions, and then you can actually have a lot more flexibility in choosing which one you want to start moving to the next step with, which maybe you take that, you can award a contract under a CSO, you can use the FAR, and you can award a FAR contract in a CSO.
Okay.
So the GSA, for example, they had authority to do CSOs, but they didn't have OT authority. So they would do CSOs, and then their contracts would be FAR-based contracts. So they'd run the competition. The competition is the sending the CSO out, getting white papers in, or whatever submissions you're asking in your commercial solutions opening. And that's broad agency announcement, as broad agency as broad. Commercial solutions opening is exactly what it says. It's an opening from the government for all commercial solutions for that particular scope you're putting in the CSO. So it's like, come one, come all.
What's the definition of commercial? Just something that's already being sold?
Yeah, something sold in the marketplace. Created? Yeah, the really weird thing about a CSO, though, is they call it, at least they call it a commercial prototype.
Okay.
So, and that's weird, because it's like, well, what is a commercial prototype? Does that mean that it's new in the market as well, or is it new to the government? And turns out, I mean, it can be something that already exists in the market. CSOs are for commercial innovations. Any technology, process, or method that is new as of the date of proposal submission, or is a new application of an existing technology applied in a novel way to government needs, qualifies as an innovation. So new can mean new to government, making the definition broad enough to include existing commercial items already in the market if their application in the government is innovative. So you can use a CSO to bring something in. I think where lawyers will hit you on using a CSO when you shouldn't is when you're trying to use a CSO to get Microsoft Office or something, I guess, maybe something that's not so innovative. But it's also the way something has existed in the market for a long time. The way it's utilized in the government could be innovative and new. Okay. Like if we haven't used Outlook the way we should have, you can use a CSO to add, Copilot or something too.
Okay, yeah.
So that's a CSO, and then the CSO can be awarded once you have the merit board goes through their evaluations. You have someone that you want to award to. You can move straight from that CSO into any kind of contract you want, a FAR-based contract or a non-FAR.
Okay. Yeah, I think I read in that article that the average software acquisition takes about 6 months right now using these faster methods.
Oh, okay.
And they want to get it down to like
even more,
weeks.
Yeah. And probably one of the reasons why it still takes 6 months in the government is we're tightening up a lot of stuff in terms of the evaluation process and how quickly we're competing. But there's probably some aspects in our culture in the DoD where we're still not willing to maybe start small or completely let go this amount of planning, where we still want to do a little bit big, that's my guess. If we really wanted to just send something out, the other thing about that too is what we found out is you have to start small, but big enough for industry to have an appetite to bite as well. So if you're gonna say, well, let's just throw a couple $100,000 at this first, we'll do a prototype, and then we'll throw more money at it if it's working. That may not be something that a lot of companies have the patience to bite at if it's that low, but they will if they know that it's going to turn into this big contract.
Yeah.
So there is a danger of the government communicating that they're starting so small that they're not going to get a lot of market participation because the big fish aren't going to, or the fish that you want aren't going to play.
Would the government communicate like, hey, we're spending $100,000 on this?
Yeah.
But ultimately we're going to spend $100 million on this. But,
if it works?
Yeah, but
I think they should.
Would
so
they communicate that?
Yeah, that's another like a stigma that used to be in government contracting is revealing your price, revealing your government cost estimate,
okay.
or revealing how much money you have to spend. Because you're basically, in a lot of people's minds, you're revealing your negotiation position.
I'm negotiating. Negotiation. This is what you do in business.
Yeah, exactly. So in the first half of my career, there was that was the mindset in defense contracting. I think just contracting throughout the whole government is this better buying power. Really, the focus was on cost above everything. All the training we had was on price analysis, cost analysis, incentives. It was just, making sure we weren't getting raked over the coals by profiteering companies, right? Yeah. And that's great, right? But the
Heaven forbid they profit.
I know. We don't want them making any money. The consequence of that, though, some of the unintended consequences of that mindset is, one, I think it unintentionally created distrust with companies. So contracting community was bred to have a distrust in companies as this like profiteering, greedy companies. The second thing is we focus way too much on price over performance and efficiency. So Will Roper was one of my favorite acquisition influencer leader. He was the head of acquisition for the Air Force back when I was a contract officer for the Air Force. So he kind of flipped that. One of the many people who kind of flipped that idea on its head and said, well, what if money is not the biggest problem? What if getting something that actually works is the problem? And what if we want to focus on that? And if we want to focus on that, then it doesn't matter as much if we're losing some kind of apparent leverage or negotiation leverage. Why don't we just slap on the table and say to companies, I've got $2 million for this. I want the best solution that can work with $2 million.
Yeah.
That way, the price gets out of the way. We've already said what the price, $2 million or less. But now the focus is all on technical capability.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at price, performance, and delivery as the three-legged stool of contracting, and usually they say one always has to give. It's usually price in the past has been the very, very top, and delivery and performance has suffered because we go with the lowest price.
Yeah, that makes and there's a difference between price and cost, right? Like,
yeah,
if the company says this thing cost $1 million, but if it takes you $1 million worth of work,
yeah,
to actually like find the cheapest solution, you end up not getting delivery and
that's true.
spend tons of time and energy and money.
Yeah,
that isn't included in the price.
There's an administrative burden.
Yeah.
There is the price of it not working and then you having to recompete and do a new contract. There's a bunch of problems with not focusing on performance or delivery first. So that's part of the shift as well, I think, too, is that it is a little bit of that shift toward, well, what actually works? And especially when we're, there's different, I think there's different opinions on where we are with a tech race with our foreign adversaries, right?
Yeah.
And the geopolitical arena.
Probably.
Yeah. So wherever you stand on that, personally, I think that, there are some things that the DoD needs to act with urgency about. Then it does move towards efficiency. It does move towards, all right, well, we don't want to waste money, but not every company's trying to profit, like only profit. And there's a lot of companies that want to help, the government. And you've got these companies, and I'll mention some of them, but I'm not speaking to them one way or the other in terms of, but some of these new players on the defense side, Palantir, Anduril, they're of course, they're profit-seeking companies, but they're also, their mission is aligned. They want to align their mission with the defense mission. They want to say to defense, we have the same goal in mind,
Yeah, totally.
So I think that that's part of it too, is, when it comes to the changing nature of modern acquisition with CSOs and with OTs, it's shifting more and more toward this closer collaboration with industry, dropping the level of distrust, dropping the nickel and dime, like, where you're hiding your price. Maybe you don't hide your price if it makes sense to tell them what your range is. And then working in that way. And that's the whole reason why OT, Other Transaction Authority, was created. It was created through statute, started with NASA in the 1960s, moved on to the DoD. It's got a whole bunch of agencies have this authority, but it's really to align. It's a contract mechanism that aligns the government more with commercial practices, especially companies who typically don't work with the government. Okay. So they call them non-traditional contracts.
Is there a set of rules for OTAs? Is there a book or something?
Well, so it depends on they have an authorizing statute that okay. So an agent.
So each OTA is its own thing?
Each authority. So an OTA is Other Transaction Authority.
Okay.
So and it is a contract. People are misunderstand that too. Like an Other Transaction is absolutely a contract. Legally speaking, it's a offer, acceptance, consideration. Okay. It's a contract. We talked about in the FAR, there's agreements like BPA's blanket purchase agreement. Mm-hmm. Those technically aren't contracts. Yeah. Those are just like you're kind of agreeing on terms. Mm-hmm. And OT, even though it's called an agreement, it is a contract. It's just it's kind of confusing. It's just not they call it a procurement contract. Uses the FAR. So usually when you think of contracts, government contracts, you're thinking of a procurement contract. Okay. And that is the FAR.
Those are the rules you got.
Those are the rules of the FAR. Okay. Yeah. And in the FAR, this book here, FAR contracting includes a whole range of different types of contracts in the FAR. So when you say FAR contracting, you can be talking about broad agency announcements, we just talked about, which lead to contracts. You can be talking about GSA schedules, IDIQs, BPAs, BOAs. BOAs, yeah.
I remember BOAs.
Yeah.
Is there anything about OTs in there?
No.
No.
No, OTs are outside of the FAR.
Okay.
So, and because it's outside of the FAR, agencies need special statutory authority. So the DoD, for example, I'm probably going to mess this up. I think they changed the statute. The authorizing statute for the DoD to use other transactions is now called, it's 10 USC 4021, I think. Okay. 4022 as well, I think. And NASA's is something different. And
so your boss just told you need to stop using this and start using OTAs. What does that mean practically for you?
Yeah. So
what do you do?
So learn how to use OTs. And
can you tell us?
Yeah. So with the secret, so I'll say just generally for the whole government, if you're a contracting professional and you're watching this, you're not DoD, check and see if your agency has authority. I think a lot more agencies have the authority without knowing it.
Okay.
Than they realize. I think USDA has.
Who would know if you have the authority?
That's a good question. Ask ChatGPT. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know.
There's lawyers.
You can ask your lawyers. You can ask your lawyer, and then you can Google and see. You can see what if IRS OT authority probably doesn't take many layers of searches to get to your answer.
Okay.
For the DoD though, you have the authority and the DoD, and then now your SecDef is telling you have to use it for new software. So then it's a matter of you knowing how to use an OT. And
where's that information?
So with the DoD, they do have an other transaction guide.
Okay.
I think it was last updated, I want to say 2021 or 2022. Okay. It's pretty good. Basically, though, the problem about with regulating something that was designed to not be regulated is with an OT, you're for the sake of industry and for the sake of you making sure you're awarding efficiently with industry, they're taking away the bumpers. So you're bowling without bumpers.
Okay, so basically. You get in trouble.
So you can get in trouble, but you also don't want the bumpers. Maybe that's not a great analogy, but
that makes sense.
You don't want to. You want to be able to color without lines because you want to be able to form this based on the circumstance and the non-traditional company you're trying to reach out to. So that includes intellectual property. So Part 27 doesn't apply of the FAR. It applies to the way you compete. You still the OT guide in the DoD still mentions that you need to compete to the maximum extent practicable.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not like a written. That's just like a universal principle. That's just life.
Yeah.
That's just like be nice to people.
Yeah.
So
okay, so I'm a contracting officer in the DoD, and I want to use an OT for something that I want to buy.
Yeah.
I think I remember something about a warrant. Like, if I'm just a normal CO can I use an OT? Do I have to get permission or something like that?
Yeah. So actually, you don't even have to be a warranted contracting officer to create another transaction. You could be a non-CO. The caveat though is that a lot of agencies will. So that's what the law says. You don't have to be a CO, but and I don't know if the DoD. I think the DoD says that too. You don't have to be a CO. A lot of local offices will say, just out of practicality, you need to be a CO to be an AO. They call it agreements authority. Agreements officer. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. Agreements officer. AO. So the AO is almost like.
That's a person with a warrant?
Well, so they don't have to have
a warrant.
A warrant is for the contracting officer. It's a warrant to obligate the government in contracts.
To sign the contract. Basically.
Yeah. So I think for an agreements officer needs to get, usually the policies, you have to have that same kind of warrant. You need to go through training. And it makes sense because the AO is going to be still obligating potentially the same amount of dollars, like potentially millions of dollars, whatever. It's prototypes, so it could be lower, but you're still operating a lot of money, or you're obligating a lot of money, but you're obligating the money in a very unstructured environment. So that's where the bowling without bumpers is. So it makes logical sense that you have a CO who kind of learns the underlying principles maybe of this, like the underlying principle, maximum extent practicable, just be nice.
Yeah.
So a lot of the, like if it says put your, if the rule here that's too restrictive is put your RFP out for 30 days, it has to be no less than 30 days. If that's too restrictive, well, what's the underlying principle of that? It's, all right, well, just put it out long enough for people to have time to give you a proposal. Boom. That's the principle you want to practice with your AO.
It kind of turns the FAR into a set
common sense. Yeah.
Of ideas that you should
take
into account.
I mean, I'll give you another example is we and Jake, we used OTs quite a bit, and we asked for feedback from companies with one of our contracts we were doing OTs from, and one of the negative feedback they were getting is we were moving at a rate where they said, you guys need to let us know before a solicitation comes out. Just give us a little bit of notice of the solicitation before it hits. I mean, you're moving. And our answer was like, oh, we were just trying to move fast. We don't have to give notice. And they were like, no, we'd like the notice.
Yeah, but
we'd like to know
if you want good stuff.
Yeah. So that's part 5 of the FAR. That's like it's publicizing your contract actions. You don't have to do everything in part 5, but we realized when they said that, like, there's an underlying principle behind part 5. There's a reason why part 5 exists in the first place. So we don't want to be subservient to the FAR and all these little clumsy ways in which they tried to follow those, but we still want to grab from the FAR those underlying principles that the FAR tried to practice and then just do them in a much more common sense way. But you don't want to not do the underlying principles. And that's where being a CO can help. And I've heard the comparison made to like Picasso. Okay. So before Picasso got into his crazy stuff, he learned classical art. He learned the rules of. Have you ever seen his classical pieces? Yeah, it's pretty good. And then he perfected that for himself before he moved into Cubism and some of his crazier stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what made it so great is because everyone understood the rules he was deviating. He understood the rules he was deviating from.
Yes.
And it wasn't just like he was guessing. So when it's like when people say, "Well, my 5-year-old can do that," well, no. Because this person actually, there was a goal. They were deviating from a certain rule. They had a point. It was purposeful. Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of OTs is you still want to know the rules you're deviating from in the FAR. It's still good to have that understanding.
Know the rules so that you can break them.
Yeah.
And still be successful.
Know the rules you're breaking.
Yeah.
So that you can so you're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. So you're still being fair with your OTs.
Okay.
And you're still giving them notice if they need it and other things like that.
Get the call.
Oh yeah. So, So what if the way you solicit for an OT can be a CSO, right? So you can do whatever you want to ask for whatever you want, however you want the proposal to come in. So again, you're not following the FAR with an OT. So you don't have to send an RFQ or an RFP, or you don't have to go on sam.gov and do a solicitation. You don't even have to use a form like a 1449. We talk about the forms that are used. Mm-hmm. You can write it on a Word document. You can write it on a napkin and then print the napkin out or take a picture of the napkin and post it somewhere. Legally, that's that could work.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Probably wouldn't make any sense, but yeah, a lot of people out of practicality that they'll use the old forms just because it's already there. It has a lot of the stuff you want included in there. So a lot of people scrap the FAR for parts.
Yeah.
They'll borrow things, but then they'll move fast. So you don't want to just completely reject the FAR when you use an OT if it doesn't make sense to, because you can borrow some things, but you also don't want to turn the OT into a FAR-based contract. You got to find that sweet spot. So you could run a CSO. You throw the CSO out there. That's going to be a very fast process. You're getting your innovative commercial. So again, this is for software. So once you figure out how to do a CSO as a contracting, and you find out the beauty of that and how that works, you got to get your merit board. You got to get your technical people. So similar to FAR-based contracting, it's not like you're working in a vacuum. Mm-hmm. You still got to get all the right acquisition team to properly run a CSO that actually looks at the submissions. But that can happen pretty fast. And then when you're ready, you can award a prototype OT. There's 3 different types of OTs. The prototype OT is probably the most common one in the Department of Defense.
Okay.
There's a basic R&D OT, I think that's 10 USC 4021 or something. That's usually like industry and government are going in together on something, 50-50 split.
Okay.
It's going to have like a dual purpose application.
Okay.
Like like GPS had a dual purpose. Yeah. GPS benefited the commercial marketplace, benefited the military.
I see.
So, but the prototype is you don't have to have that dual purpose. You can award to a non-traditional company just to get a prototype started. If the prototype works, you can move straight into a production OT. That's the third kind. That's where you're actually cranking out. You're actually getting capabilities out into the hands of the users. This goes beyond the applied research kind of. This is actually now you're producing something.
All right. So OT is not just for prototypes. It can be for.
So OTs are for prototypes,
but not just for prototypes.
Well, so once the prototype turns into a success, once it becomes successful, then it can turn into a production. But you can't just award straight production. So it's got the production.
Really? You have to start it.
You have to start it as a prototype.
Okay, so someone like you mentioned Anduril.
Yeah.
Earlier, like they make these. Well, they just made like a cruise missile or something, right?
Yeah.
And they made it without the government.
Mm-hmm.
They can't really sell it anywhere else. So
yeah,
would they get a prototype?
They could
OT, even though they've already created it. And it's already finished. And
because the prototype doesn't necessarily entail development. So prototype is pretty broad. Okay. So the prototype could be you're prototyping this. It's this novel thing that's entering the government architecture. Maybe they tested that thing in the private sector. We have no idea how it's going to fit in the military environment. And that's the prototype.
Not a true prototype, but like we're trying it out.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's what seems like a oxymoron with commercial prototype of CSO. Yeah. It's like, well, if it's commercial already, it's already available commercial item. But that's where prototype is a very broad term. It can just mean something novel. It could also be a novel business process. Okay. So something new and creative that we're going to try. Mm-hmm. I think that we're going to try maybe is the focus. Less on, is this already available in the commercial market? It's like, is this something that the Air Force is going to try, or the Army's going to try, because it's not, we don't really have it. It doesn't exist.
That makes sense. Okay.
And then once that's successful, then you can move into a production. That could be like full rate production. So if you're prototyping drones, let's say Defense Innovation Unit, let's say they're prototyping drones. They do a prototype contract that is successful. The battery life meets the specifications. The accuracy meets specifications. They put some AI to it maybe, and they're doing some accuracy or object detection. Everything passes. Then they can move into a production contract where it's basically like a catalog, where it's just you're slapping that on. You can order from that production. DIU can open that up to the whole Defense Department. Anybody can order from that production OT. And that's why this couples so well. The CSO to OT process couples so well to the acquisition, software acquisition pathway. Because in the software acquisition pathway, you need speed of relevance. You got to react fast. Mm-hmm. You got to do, and you're going to need contracts that are not only fast for that and reactive, but that are contracts that are best suited for software commercial companies. And that is why CSOs and OTs were created. So, I mean, these authorities were set up for the commercial marketplace, especially software. And now it's the Defense Department's just saying, again, nothing really new under the sun with this new memo, but it's like now there's just a much more official, direct mandate to say, guys, start using these now. This is why this authority exists.
Yeah, and probably a lot of people wouldn't use it because, you don't get in trouble if you follow the FAR. Right?
Yeah.
But maybe there's a little bit of pressure of like, you will get in trouble if you follow the FAR because you're wasting our time.
There's a misperception, I think, that OTs, that if you're trying to just go with an OT, you're trying to find the easy button or the lazy way out. Or in my opinion, I've seen it the other way around, where in many ways it's much more lazy to go with the more traditional FAR-based route because it's what you know, than taking the time and moving into an area where you're not as comfortable with, that's not as structured. That takes a lot more skill. Sometimes OTs take just as much time. You can do it. You can run a FAR contract that's super fast still.
Really?
Yeah, you can use Part 13. Remember we talked about Part 13? Yeah. Part 13 is not used the right way. Yeah. If this was used properly, Part 13 and Part 12, especially 13 and 12 combined, you can knock out stuff faster than probably most of the OTs that are being executed right now. But the difference, though, is that with OTs, they still provide you. It's not just speed. They're providing you with new levels of flexibility that connects to commercial marketplace. This is still very inaccessible to many startup companies with the intellectual property rights, the cost accounting standards, things like that. It's just
so you can set up different rules for IP. If
you can make your own IP decisions. Yeah, make up your own IP rules. You can agree to do forward pricing where you pay the startup a lot more money before they actually deliver something. That's like you're funding them a little so they have the resources to. You can do it here a little bit. It's in Part 32, it's contract financing. It's this whole drawn out process. Yeah. With OTs, you can say, no, we'll go ahead and give you $2 million now. Yeah. And then and you can set up the mechanics to make that company accountable for the two. Yeah. So again, you don't want to be all loosey goosey, but it just allows you to just work in ways that has just become so rigid in the FAR, and you can just become common sense with these companies. Okay. Yeah.
All right, that might be a good place to stop. I guess. All right. Yeah. I'll ask you one more question. Might not be relevant at all. How do these different contract methods work with work statements?
Yeah.
Do the work statements change along with that, or?
Yeah. So you can technically. So they're all kind of agnostic of one another. You can use a standard statement of work. You can use a subset of a statement of work called a performance work statement, or you can just put your objectives out there in a SUE. Okay. With any of those, you can.
So would you use a SUE with a CSO?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they kind of the same thing? Does CSO replace this?
SUE? I'm just one fits the other better, right?
Different order or something?
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to think of you can put. This is going to be a bad example. You can put on your ice cream like melted licorice, but caramel is just so much. Caramel is so much better. It fits the point. Yeah, that's probably a bad example. Anyway, really? So the whole point of a CSO is to have come one, come all. Okay. This is what we want. These are our objectives. We're opening this up for commercial solutions that can meet that. Okay. It just fits to do a statement of objectives out there where you're not being too specific. Nothing is stopping you from putting a performance work statement, a detailed performance work statement in a commercial solutions opening. Yeah. But it kind of messes with the vibe of what the CSO is supposed to be. You're going to get a lot more restrictive answers. Yeah. It's, and then if you do a statement of work, like a non-performance based statement of work, really detailed, well, then you're kind of losing the whole ball on having industry speak to you. These whole vehicles are set up for industry to speak to you about their solutions, not the government dictating their solution. So yeah, I guess you can use a SOW, a statement of work, with an OT, but you're really kind of missing one of the big purposes of using an OT to begin with. So you're kind of ruining the magic a little bit.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I just kind of was hearing some things that, with the statement objectives, come tell us what you got. That made sense with a CSO. So I didn't know if they were locked together or not. So.
Well, I mean, let me give you a use case of what I'll let you know what DIU does. Okay. So DIU has a process they've been doing. So DIU is in large part responsible for the CSO, the existence of the CSO, Defense Innovation Unit, and they will do a CSO. Mm-hmm. You can call what they put in their CSO a statement of objectives. It can be like 2 paragraphs. That's it. This is what we want. 2 paragraphs. It's just our objectives. They're not going to do all this like, fill out this form, let us know your energy efficient levels and all that stuff. No government jargon. It's just sticking strict to the problem. That's a SOO. So they put a SOO inside their announcement, their opening, their CSO, and then they get a whole bunch of white papers or submissions come in, and then they run a phased approach. So on the second phase, they pick the companies that pass a certain gate, again, through the merit board or whoever's kind of looking at all those. And then based on those, usually they try to get it down to 2 or 3 companies. Those are scheduled to come in for an oral presentation. I think DIU still does this. I'm not sure if they still do this process, but so you only have like a handful of companies coming in for oral presentations. They're usually in person. This is before COVID that I really worked with DIU on some of these, but they would, come into their office in like Mountain View, right? Yeah. And then they would give that, so that would actually give the customer, again, to the whole spirit of connecting with industry face to face. Now you're able to, and to help inform the selection of your award, to have this interaction with the people who are offering. So you're not just defining them by a packet of papers. Now you're really able to have discussions with them. And again, underlying principles, you got to make it fair. So that's a given. You can, like, be nice, common sense, it's a given. Yeah. But then they move into, once they go into who they want to award to. And again, a CSO, you can award to multiple people with a CSO. We didn't talk about that, but usually in a traditional FAR contract, there's one winner, one awardee to rule them all. Yeah. CSO, you can award multiple.
Okay.
So, but then and only then will DIU start bringing in the boilerplate, IP term, all the stuff.
Yeah.
That's just makes your eyes glaze over, the legalese. In FAR-based contracting, all that is included in provisions in the solicitation. So you got like your solicitation can sometimes be a 100-page document. It's got all the clauses. DIU, and what you can do with the CSO with the SOO is you can flip that around and say, we're just going to start with 2 paragraphs. That's it. Okay. Yeah. And then you
can adjust those clauses and everything based on kind of how the answers come in and what.
Yeah. As you get down selected as a company and you go through this process, you go through, maybe you get invited for an oral presentation, which is a great sign. It means you're still in the race.
Yeah.
You're going to start getting hit with more, more details of the agreement, right? And then when you finally get to that prototype OT, again, if DIU awards then, so this is the other part of the process. So they don't do a FAR-based contracts. Once they decide to contract with the companies, whoever's won that whole CSO process, that phase process, they're going to be awarding most likely prototype OTs according to 10 USC 4022, I think.
Okay.
And then they're going to set up prototype, what it takes to pass the prototype, and then they're going to move on to production. But that prototype OT is when they're going to, they don't have to follow the FAR, they don't have to put all these clauses from Part 52, but they do want to put enough in there. I mean, you got to put the T's and C's in there. It's a contract.
T's and C's, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like private contracting. It's like, what are 2 tech companies including in their contracts?
Yeah.
Even when tech companies contract, sometimes those contracts make your eyes glaze over. It's like all this boilerplate. Well, fine, but at least the government's now reflecting that instead of doing their own like boilerplate that's pig Latin to everybody but a bureaucrat.
Yeah.
So that's what DIU does. And then I think that this memo is really basically saying, do what DIU's been doing for a while. Do what some of these other forward-thinking, Air Force, CDAO, there's others who have been doing this for a while. The whole DoD now needs to get around this.
So the sum up is, this is meant to make things faster, and more flexible,
more efficient, more efficient. Yeah.
Okay.
And more. I mean, it's supposed to put us into the 21st century.
Yeah.
Where and to the acquisition professionals out there who've made it this far, who are listening, who may have learned something from this, and unfortunately, there's not a lot out there right now with training on this, but there will be. And so sit tight, because I think everyone, at least, I think it's not just the DoD, it's civilian agencies too. I think everyone will start learning this process, and that applies to companies who may be watching this as well. Learn what OTs are, because you may be the recipient of them. There's a big, being a non-traditional company, that's a big category.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I feel like there's a company that I heard of that has education in their name. Maybe they should
Yeah, that's
create
true.
some of that training.
We should.